Welcome to the Karmic Mirror podcast, brought to you by Fifth Line Studios. In this space, we unravel the profound wisdom tucked within the folds of the self-help world and present it to you in a way that resonates with the heart of the collective.
Our mission is to seamlessly bridge the gap between esoteric knowledge and practical tools for everyday life. Whether you're a seasoned seeker or just beginning your path, join us and uncover the magic within and around you. Tune in and let the journey begin. Hello and welcome to another episode of Karmic Mirror. I'm Michelle.
I'm Allie. Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
Today, we are diving into one of my favorite astrological topics, which is the nodes. And specifically today, we're talking about the North Node and its role in shaping our life's direction and in our karmic growth. And the nodes, a lot of astrologers really view the North and South Node as the most significant, most important point on our natal chart because the nodes can really point towards what our soul wants to learn and experience in this lifetime.
And when Michelle says it's one of her favorite subjects, I can attest to that because I remember just this morning, I said, oh my gosh, yes, my first introduction to the nodes was sitting in my row home in Baltimore and you and I having conversations and me just geeking out about the North and South Node. Before we dive in, Michelle, where can people find their North Node and South Node if they were looking? I think maybe out of the gate, they might pause and want to go take a look before we get into this conversation. Where are some places you would recommend that they could go find their North and South Node?
All right. Well, if you listen to our astrology primer episode, we talked a little bit about where you can find your natal chart. We shared some of our favorite resources. I think we always talk about Chani Nicholas, who is an astrologer that both Allie and we both have the Chani app. And I just find Chani Nicholas to be one of those astrologers who really understands not only, modern culture, but how to weave astrology and these archetypes and make it really accessible and easy to understand, easy to relate to the world today. And so Chani Nicholas is a great app. You can search anywhere. You can, Google natal charts and have your natal chart if you don't already. But what you're going to want to look for within the natal chart, specifically for the North and South nodes, are the little symbol that's going to look kind of like a horseshoe. Or it is going to look like a horseshoe. It's a horseshoe. The North Node is going to look like a regular horseshoe, and the South Node will be like a upside down horseshoe. And so that's where you'll find it. If you want to pause, it's a little symbol, and you really can't miss it. You can look astroseek.com, astrology.com.
Astro Cafe. There's a bunch. And then the thing that I think I've heard it, Michelle, but then as I was prepping for this podcast, I heard it a little bit more that we have the same North and South Node as people born in the same year as us. Something similar like that. Have you heard that?
That is exactly correct.
Okay. So there's also the thing where we get into I'll be honest with you. I think when we first started looking at North-South Node, and I didn't have a Chani app where it literally is like, your North Node is in Cancer in the 11th house. And I was looking at a traditional chart. I was like, where the F? Horseshoe? What?
Yeah. Okay. So
I think also helpful, to know that the years, and I know it's not exact, like 1982 to 1983 is all of this, but there is a succinct time period where born February 1982, if somebody is February 1982 or March 1982, chances are you are a Cancer, North Node, Capricorn, South Node.
That's exactly right. The North and South Node, which are points on our natal chart, points in the sky, they are going to change signs every about 18 to 19 months. They're going to change signs. So you can kind of look at it, like you said, people born around the same time as you are going to have that same placement of their North and South Node. Now, not the same exact placement, and we'll get into this a little bit deeper too throughout the episode, but thinking about sort of like generational themes because everyone born within that 18 to 19 month time frame is going to have the same sign as their north and south nodes. So for example, my north node is in Aries and south node, which is always going to be on the exact opposite 180 degrees away from the north node. Your south node, mine is in Libra. And so everyone born within that period of time is going to have the exact same sign, but we're all going to have it in different houses depending on our personal charts.
And that was the other thing I learned is that, well, we always have that theme of duality. And so I was like, oh, here again, my North Node and South Node duality. And I learned upon doing more research, I was like, oh, everybody, there is that 180. And so when Michelle
Yes.
says that, if you're looking at that pizza chart in your natal chart, it's just those signs will be exact opposites on your natal chart. And that is for everyone's North and South nodes.
Mhm. Yes. And so I learned about the nodes before the Channy app actually was a thing, probably was already in the works for many, many years, but there is a woman and she came on my radar. Her name is Dara Dubonnet, and she came on my radar through surprise, surprise, the To Be Magnetic podcast. There was an episode that I heard several years ago, and it was with Jenna Zoe, who, if you don't know, we'll probably mention her a million times. She's a human design expert. And with Lacey Phillips, who's a founder of To Be Magnetic, and Dara Dubonnet, who at the time was really specializing in North Node teachings. And I thought it was super fascinating. It totally piqued my curiosity. And she talked a lot about the signs that your North Node is in. And
That was my introduction
mhm,
because I really remember that. I think you shared that with me when we were first. I can
definitely.
picture myself sitting in my bedroom in Baltimore, just mind blown as they were going through all of the astrological signs and what that meant for North and South Node. And it just really blew my mind. Tell me also, Michelle, because why did we want to do this North Node right now? There's a lot coming up as well. And so we wanted to make sure the Karmic Mirror listeners got a heads up on some of the astrological things coming up. Is it too soon to talk about that right now? Should we circle back?
I think it's perfect.
Okay.
So we have, I think by the time this episode airs, we'll be entering into or we'll be in eclipse season. And so on September 17th, we're going to have a lunar eclipse, which just means that it's a full moon eclipse near the North Node. And the North Node at that time will be in the sign of Pisces. And so we talked about these collective themes, and this is where it's really helpful to know your own natal chart because you can look at, okay, well, my North Node is in Aries. What does this have to do with me? Well, this is more of a collective theme that can kind of help us scout what's going on collectively. What are the lessons kind of collectively happening that we can be more attuned to, that we can have awareness of, so that we can really navigate what's happening in the cosmos and on a personal level. And so, of course, we just thought it was the perfect time to explore the North Node, what it even means, talk a little bit about eclipses, and talk a little bit about the influence of Pisces so that by the time this first eclipse rolls around on the 17th, we have a little bit better understanding.
So we know that across time and space, we encounter energy of the moon in a myriad of ways. So one of those ways is through your nodes, and those can represent potentially abundant openings and or blockages, barriers to destiny in your life path. It can shed great light on the karmic channels of your lifetime. The thing that always piques my interest when you say, so we've got this lunar eclipse in our North Node in Pisces, and that's for the collective. Everyone will have that. Well, then, like, I think of what does that mean for me as a sun in Pisces then? Because we're talking North Node, but that's where I tend to get a little confused astrologically. And I know there's lots of details to your natal chart, but does that impact people who have Pisces in their chart somewhere a little bit more? And if so, how?
Oh, I love that. Okay, so I think, well, one, we're always, we have all the signs in our charts. So when we think about what's happening on a collective level, one thing that's happening is that we haven't had a North Node eclipse in Pisces in several decades. So when something like that occurs in our lifetime, it's definitely something we can pay attention to. It's almost like we're initiating, or a new storyline is being initiated or activated. And because it's that North Node energy, which we haven't really talked too much about yet, but it's the direction we're moving towards. So we talked about karmic growth, right? Like it's where we're moving towards. So when we talk about Pisces specifically, it's all going to depend on where Pisces lands in your chart. So for you, right, like sun is in Pisces, and your sun is in
Seven.
your seventh house of committed partnerships. So that could be activating a new storyline in that house of committed partnerships. And hello.
Why are you giggling right now? Does that because it's a theme for me? I giggle because
Yeah.
a lot of times when Michelle and I just start to like I'll ask Michelle questions like these in our voice note and she'll just say the things and we giggle because that's exactly what's going on in my life right now and I just haven't put words to it or understood it until here we are. So
Yeah. So I think we'll talk about, like, we're going to talk about, the North Node in Pisces today, but we're also going to talk about our own personal placements of North Nodes, because that plays a role as well. And it's just really helpful to have an awareness of all of these placements and understand, when something is happening in the universe around you, transits are happening, especially when that hasn't happened in so many years. It's really good to understand yourself better and understand how this transit is going to help kind of usher in, like I said, that new storyline or some change or new direction, or maybe it's more energy towards your North Node where you're going. So,
yeah. Let's differentiate between South Node and North Node.
mhm,
While this is a North Node episode, we are going to be diving into the South Node. However, I think it's important to discuss them simultaneously, just to give an idea,
totally.
right? So, the way you always talk to me about it is like the head of the dragon and the tail of the dragon. And you do it so beautifully. So, might you use that verbiage to just highlight the difference between South Node and North Node?
Absolutely. Okay. So in astrology, as we talk about often, and I think it will always be a part of the conversation, there's always myth and archetypes surrounding astrology, because it's messaging, it's storytelling, and it's helping us understand ourselves through these archetypes. So when we talk about north and south nodes, we're talking about, and saying the head and the tail of the dragon. This is something that I've heard so many astrologers reference. And I think the symbology of the dragon, of the North Node being the head of the dragon, it's like, what is that insatiable point or aspect of your life that you're being constantly guided towards, for your own growth, for your own life's mission? Something that I love about the North Node is, I've heard one astrologer also describe it as a doorway, which I liked. So the head of the dragon, but I've never heard anyone use it as a doorway, and like this doorway that you want to walk through, because the North Node is all about the messaging of our soul's purpose. And you hear the word insatiable a lot talking about the head of the dragon, because like it's this thing we're always moving towards. And you think about, like, when you have this big goal or vision or your soul's mission, you're not going to reach that point, at one point in your life, and you're like, okay, I'm done evolving in this lifetime. Like, I did it, guys. We're here. I'm
High fives all around.
yep, I'm 38 and I did it.
Enlightened.
I reached
Done.
my karmic growth and evolution. Like, no, we are always reaching towards this throughout our entire lifetime, this go around.
If I'm understanding correctly with the North Node, the way that I interpret it is that it's meant to designate the soul's current journey and trajectory in this lifetime and where you're meant to expand. So, what you're meant to grow into. So, Dharma is what they were talking about, as opposed to karma, which is your South Node in this episode of a podcast I was listening to. But
Mm,
really, it's the way they explained it, the essential nature of reality or your karmic truth in this
Yeah.
lifetime was how it was highlighted and felt like a cool definition and understanding for me.
Yeah. Well, and going back to the dragon analogy or the symbology of it, right? If the North Node is ahead of the dragon and it's what we're constantly moving towards, it's our soul's mission, our soul's purpose playing out, and we're reaching towards it. It's the skills, it's the that we are here to kind of develop and hone so that we can get closer to that aspect of ourselves, our soul's mission. And then the South Node is a lot of astrologers will consider the South Node to be kind of our past experiences, the habits that we come into this life with. Some will talk about it as kind of the things that we pick up throughout childhood that we inherit from our parents, from our lineage. And then a lot of astrologers will refer to it as your past lives if you believe in reincarnation. And the two together, you think of it kind of like if the South Node is what you bring with you, it's your comfort zone, it's the habits and the things that you really are so innate, or even like your past mistakes or the lessons that you didn't learn in past lives, then your North Node is helping you to gain the skills so that you can learn those karmic lessons and that you can grow and expand, like you said, and have your own soul's evolution. And so it's about using the North Node to develop skills that are going to help us move out of our comfort zone. And so it's really cool to think of it in that way.
Yeah. And why I get that it lights you up so much to think more about the North Node than the South Node, right? And not that it's hierarchy of like one's cooler or more engaging, but
Mhm.
I think the North Node brings like a sense of purpose or optimism
Totally.
or like lets me get curious of how I am or am not leaning into those elements of Cancer being my case and my North Node.
Mhm.
But that was a great way to differentiate.
Yeah, yeah. Well, do we want to touch on eclipses at all? A little, just like really quickly.
Yeah, let's talk about eclipses.
All right. So eclipses are very powerful catalysts for transformation and for change. And so when we have an eclipse happening, right? We have an eclipse in the North Node. It's like, where are we having this potent energy to move us, to really propel us forward towards our own personal growth? And we won't stress too much about eclipses. I think we will kind of probably touch on some of the basic, I will say, hygiene of eclipse season, right? And I think it's important to mention it because so often I see people are like, talking about eclipses and talking about manifestation and, initiating and making things happen. And what I understand about eclipses is, thinking back to ancient civilizations, what happened when I mean, we don't know. We weren't there. Maybe
Yeah.
we were, but, um, you
One of my
know,
lives was definitely there.
1,000%. So you think about a lunar eclipse, right? That's a full moon. And if you're an ancient civilization and the moon is lighting the sky, and this is how you're not, you're looking at the sky and you're having an eclipse and it's blocking out the entire moon, well, that is a major moment. If you have no electricity and the moon is your light and it's being blocked out, well, something to note. And if it's happening on a schedule, right, or on a regularly occurring basis, as it so happens, it can really point to some pretty significant moments throughout time. So I think about like there was an example of it being something that helped ancient civilizations to predict rulers. So it was like making huge decisions or things happening around eclipses. And what I understand now, because it can feel almost like, you always think about full moons. What do people say around full moons? That, ambulance rates go up, like things happen, or our brains are on, we can't sleep because the sky is so lit up, right? And so thinking about just the concept of full moons and how it kind of we have this idea that it kind of makes us a little loopy. Well, what happens when an eclipse? It's kind of almost like another chaotic moment. And so what I know to be true about eclipses is it's really not a time to be kind of trying to manifest and make things happen in that moment. It's really a time for you to so to speak, be in the dark when the sky is blacked out and reflect deeply and understand what am I being, encouraged to reflect on, what is coming up, what, even thinking about full moons, what is being revealed to me, what's being almost illuminated, or what's in the dark for me that I need to kind of really dive into. So, if any of that makes sense, I think it's really the eclipse thing I'll say is like it's a time to tend to your body because the moon represents our body and our emotions. It's a time to rest, drink water, ground, reflect, process. So, all of that around eclipse season.
Mhm. I was probably just avoiding talking about eclipse season because I am ho hum hating all of the freaking energies going on right now. I was joking earlier with Michelle. I'm like, you told me I can't blame Mercury in retrograde anymore. So I was like, wait, we got full moons, we've got eclipses. And so just a lot of energies. But that's coming up on a beautiful date of September 17th. So just being mindful of the energies that could be leading up to that. So there also is always
Huh.
those energetics. It won't necessarily be on September 17th, right at that date that you would feel those emotions. You might feel that leading into it and also on that shadow end. So just being really mindful of that. Thank you for that explanation on eclipses. So then good segue into that being positioned in
Yeah,
Pisces.
for sure. So, we have this partial lunar eclipse. It's, the moon is conjunct the North Node. The North Node is in Pisces. And we know that eclipses are these astrological events. They're super potent and they can reveal a lot to us. They can, subtly initiate transformation that will kind of roll out over the coming months. And so this particular eclipse being in the sign of Pisces is all about, we think about themes of Pisces. So if the sign is about the approach or kind of like the how things play out, well, then the themes of Pisces are all about like emotional insights, spiritual growth, dreams. um, and so it can be when we talk about illuminating or revealing things to ourselves and things to pay attention to, this can start to reveal your emotional patterns. It can begin to help illuminate maybe beliefs that we're here to kind of put down that maybe aren't necessarily supporting us in the direction we're headed. Talking about North Node. Um, Also, Pisces, it's the last sign in the zodiac, and your sun Pisces. So let's talk about it because I think that in everything we talk about, but in astrology, we always talk about dualities. We talk about duality in everything, but everything has this like higher and lower frequency to it, right? And so when I think about Pisces on a higher frequency, it's like I said, those spiritual insights, it's emotional wisdom and being that sage guide. And when I think about lower frequencies in this context of Pisces, I think about escapism. I think about the urge to escape reality and live within the dreams and the delusion. And so just having that awareness of these feelings might be heightened around this time. What's coming up for you?
I think I just go into my head of like automatically because I'm such a doer. So I'm like, how am I not living in reality? How am I, you know, it's interesting. I think I always want to put very like black and white on things. And a lot of times when you're talking and you're sharing, I'm a bit of a processor and like to see how things show up real life. But gosh, it's September 17th. So I'm like, when are we recording? Is this still impacting me right now? Because it feels like it is. And when I'm looking up online about the eclipse being in Pisces, it just talks about, well, and it also says Moon in Pisces, 11th house of friends and groups will oppose the sun in the fifth house of creativity and pleasure, which may make it difficult to distinguish right from wrong at first. However, the energy of this lunation can be used to connect with people who share your vision. So, like
Mm,
reading that just makes me start to prepare. I guess is what comes up for me is like,
for
where are you
sure.
living in reality versus not reality, but also who are nourishing and watering your dreams. I think we had talked about Mark Groves one time had said, like, hang out with those people who aren't the problem people, who don't always look for the problems. And so that's what I kind of think about coming up around that. What are your thoughts? Where's Pisces in your chart?
Pisces is in my second house of money and assets.
Okay.
Um, but what comes up hearing you say that, right? You talked about the shared vision. Okay, here's the thought that I have around the North Node eclipse in Pisces is if we're thinking about shared visions and big dreams, right? Like transformation, initiating some change, right? It's a lunar north node eclipse. Like we don't have to do anything. This is already playing out. It's just for us to be aware of, stay grounded. But when you say shared vision, obviously I'm thinking about like, you know, um, I use this podcast, right? Like this is a good example of like a shared vision example, right? We have a shared vision for this podcast while the kind of downside of getting lost in the moving away from reality, if that's the lower frequency of this particular moment or this transit, then to me, it's all about how do I focus on the big vision? How do I keep my eyes on the dream, on the direction I'm heading, North Node? And how do I also ground myself in reality by showing up and doing the work? And the word I wrote down was accountability because you said shared visions. And so I was thinking about, well, how do we do things from that place of like accountability because you can have the big dream, you can have the big vision, and that's wonderful. And then you can also get lost in it and not do any of the needed action steps that to make it come to fruition and not put in the hard work that needs to happen. And that's kind of like the duality of the North and the South node, right? It's like, can we also get lost in our South node of like, what's our comfort zone? Yeah, it's really easy to do. And how can we lean into the North node energy of like, yes, I have these things, these habits I came into this life with, and I don't have to stay in them. I can, use them to inform how I move towards my goals, my future. Does that make sense?
It makes complete
A little.
sense. Yeah. And I'm just going to be really vulnerable. A lot of times when we're recording, I'm listening to you talk and I can get hello quad left is like my brain will just, I'm in a completely different world and I'll just be very vulnerable when the long pause behind the Pisces and the explanation. What I was thinking is, and this is shadow and it's just something to get interested in is you're not in reality. All the dreams and all the hopes and all the things you're building right now, that's not reality. And you're like living in this la la land. And also if you think about Capricorn in my South Node,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really interesting. And I don't want to get into that too much because we are going to have a whole episode on it. But I think it just stirs up for me my addiction to productivity
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
the having to do things. And that falls, like Pisces and the 12th house and like the last of the zodiac sign is very ethereal, is very dreamlike, is very like creative and fluid. And that just, I mean, hello, Cancer North Node, right? Also being there for me is just the uncomfortableness of like leaning into it and the stories I tell myself, even when you're sharing things,
Mm-hmm.
is just a bigger growth edge and things to get interested about, right? Because when you say, oh, how are you dreaming? How is this coming up? Like I automatically go into, oh, you gotta go get a 9 to 5 job because this podcast thing isn't working, or like what you're doing, right? It's where your ego takes
Yeah.
you. Anyway, so it's interesting to start having those conversations and thinking through that.
No, 100%. I also think it's important to mention that we are going to have a second episode. We didn't really talk about this, but we are going to have a follow-up episode, which is all about the South Node and the eclipse that's happening in Libra on October 2nd. But
Buckle
buckle
up.
up. Carl Jung coined archetypes in within astrology, but he described, I think, the South Node as also being your shadow, which makes total sense to everything you're saying, right? Of course, because you said shadow, you said, or I think you said ego, not shadow, but of course that Capricorn energy is going to be your comfort zone. And it is going to be the thing that, if we're stuck in our comfort zones, can inhibit your growth towards your soul's purpose and your karmic growth, which is to lean into this other opposite energy, right? Because we have the capability, we contain multitudes to hold the duality of both. And that's the beauty of understanding the nodes. I just want to kind of like go back a little bit. So, just thinking about this particular eclipse on September 17th, right? So, we're talking emotional insights that are going to help you better understand the direction you're heading in. And so when we talk about reflection and rest, it's so that you can be open to just tune in, listen to what those emotional patterns or beliefs are that are coming up. Listen to, when I think of Pisces, I think of intuition as well. So being aware, what are the things that are just coming up for you? And you don't have to do anything about it other than pay attention. We talked about the moon governing our emotions, our subconscious, our body. And so those things are going to come up organically, I think, if we're open to them. And so the other note I had was about this particular transit being illuminating what maybe we need to accept emotionally for deeper alignment. And so, what else did we talk about? We talked about where it falls in your chart, which we won't, that's so personalized, but you definitely want to look at, where does it fall in my chart? Because thinking about if the sign is shaping the approach, then the placement is where in your life. So, whatever house number, that's the area of your life that this particular theme is likely going to play out, if it's something that you experience on a really deeply personal level.
Committed partnerships, definitely in there. And I think, you know
Hmm.
what it is? It's like that escapism was interesting. I think that was the word that kind of triggered the feeling before. And it's just so apparent as I hear you talk. And here's the difference. We talk a lot
Yeah.
about spiritual like bypassing, and maybe that's not the best definition in this, but it's almost like
Hmm.
I know the thing and I know it, but now's my job to like do it's not enough to just like know the thing and that's where you land. But when you even bring up like rest, I know that my challenges are more taking the rest, just feeling accomplished by just taking time to receive the influx of intuition coming in, right? I know it. I just like my life coach says, we kind of point at our head, like I know it. And then I hold my heart and I'm like, but I don't know it yet. And when you were talking earlier, what came up for me is like, just tell me all the right things to do. Just give me a list, tell me the things to do so that I can navigate this North Node position in Pisces matched with a partial lunar eclipse. Let me know the things I can do to navigate this so there will be no pain, no hard things. But that's like the control of trauma and projection. And it's interesting that that comes up in here. But again, the benefits of understanding astrology is that I can start to get ahead of it and understand that those are themes that are going to come up. And my balance now is to surrender a little bit and not control and not be in fear of the things that might come.
I think you described it so perfectly, of like surrendering and being aware of the themes. And yeah, I think that's the beauty of our own duality, is that I'm going to like go off into a stream of consciousness or whatever it is. And you're like, okay, but like, let's talk about practicality and how can I actually use this in real life? And so, yeah, should we talk a little bit more about the North Node in Pisces, a little tiny deep dive?
What are we missing there that might be impactful for the Karmic Mirror listeners to know?
Earlier, I mentioned that Pisces always, I think of the word intuition with Pisces. And so, what comes up that may come up for you or people listening is maybe you feel that around this time, and I think what you said earlier about like you might feel it a couple days before, a couple days after. For me, I always feel when something is potent for me, and mind you, I'm not over here like every full moon and new moon, I'm like dancing under the star. No, I'm like very um
I'm like, can we feel that 23 days in
yeah,
advance?
no.
Because that's how it's feeling today, 23 days in advance.
But the cool thing about, all of these, teachings, whether it's astrology and then all the different layers of different types of astrology or whatever. And then we talk about human design. And once you start to get into this space and you start to apply the lessons or apply the teachings, you start to see how everything is connected. And so we may be feeling different aspects. Like it's like anything. It's hard to pinpoint any one particular thing because everything is super, super connected to one another. But like I said, I think with the Pisces, you may be feeling, and like I said, I think I tend to, when something is going to be a little bit more potent, obviously, I don't know if that's going to be the case, but when it is and it's an astrological transit, I tend to feel it like around, usually a little bit before, like a day or two before. And then I'll read something and be like, oh, that's what I was feeling. Okay, I get it. And so with Pisces being that, emotional wisdom, the intuitive sage, I think about could your own intuition feel maybe more heightened around this time to pay attention to? And thinking about because it's near the North Node, that point, our soul's purpose that we're moving towards, that insatiable head of the dragon. I'm thinking about what are the, and I might be repeating myself again, but it's important to say again is what intuitive insights are coming up around this time for me that I need to tune into? What are the intuitive insights that are pointing towards my emotions, maybe my emotional habits or patterns? And what am I here to learn right now and trust that it's going to play out? It's not going to happen in the moment because eclipses again aren't this time to like overhaul your life. It's a time to just listen in and reflect on what you're being asked to learn or develop or let go of in order for your highest growth or your soul's purpose. And so, what learnings are going to unfold? What boundaries do we need to set in order to bring these Pisces big dreams, big vision to life? Also, something we didn't talk about was we said the word big dreams, but we couldn't touch on dreams in general, which Pisces can be connected to the actual dream world, right? So that's really interesting to me. I'm not a person that keeps like a dream journal, but in our conversations, like some people really do. They wake up and they remember their dreams or they write them down to process. And maybe perhaps for the collective, maybe this is a time when you are going to actually be like, oh, wait, hold on. I just had a dream and I remembered it. Let me write it down. Is anything coming through with this? Do I need to, is there something, is there a message within this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think about the fish swimming different ways. The
Mm,
Pisces, just the symbol, and that circles back to also thinking through those like highest selves. How did you define
mhm.
that again? When you think
I think you said like high
high
frequency, low
frequency,
frequency,
low
high vibe, low
frequency,
vibe.
just understanding that there may be some, I hate to use words like difficulties, challenging,
No, but it's true. Yeah.
just understanding that there will be a lot of emotions coming up that will feel conflicting. And so I'm already got my eyes on the prize of like, hey, probably around that time, really safe, intimate circle of people that you're around because there could be some high energies and a lot of things coming up. And for me, those energies and those emotions paired with just real life stuff, just making sure it's like the safest environment for me.
Well, what you said about challenges and difficulties, I think is a really important part of the conversation as well, because if we're being invited to look at emotional patterns or spiritual growth opportunities or intuitive insights, on the flip side, like you said, where are we what patterns, what habits might be tied to also these themes of escapism and avoiding the challenge, avoiding the difficulty. That is so a necessary part of our learning and our growth. That's exactly it. And that's the story of the North and South nodes again. Just so
And
cool.
it brings me back to one of my favorite, Alanis Morissette has a quote. I watched her on Super Soul Sunday, and she had said, and this has resonated with me for like 10 years. She's like, well, as if as humans we're exempt from pain, because one of my survival mechanisms, I guess, if we're thinking about like nervous system, is just trying to control everything so that there's a positive outcome. And so when I think about these eclipses and, being in Pisces, and even just you sharing of like the challenges, and like things will be evoked, and there will be feelings, and there will be opportunities, and there will be challenges, just help set me up again. I think maybe this is more articulately what I was trying to convey earlier, is sets me up more for success, because I know I can give myself love and grace and be in a really supportive, loving community around that time, to know that, it's people I can say that can say to me like, hey, I think this is like you're controlling stuff going on,
Mm-hmm.
and like in a loving way, is really helpful. So that's kind of what comes up for me on the heels of what you were
I love
sharing too.
that. Well, and that's the thing is like that's the whole point of the conversation is, of knowing what's happening in the cosmos so that we can navigate it with more confidence, with more balance in our nervous system. So, I
Mhm.
think we've kind of talked a lot about the eclipse.
Here's where I know people get
Yeah,
confused, because I am said people too, because I kind of brought this up earlier, right? So we get the collective theme, but then also knowing that stuff's going on with the North Node, well, I don't want to say should, it's helpful for us to also understand where our North nodes are individually, I would
for
assume,
sure.
right? So what's the difference in paying attention to where it is collectively and where it is individually? Is
Yeah.
there a different way to look at
Um,
that?
I guess if I had to say, I think knowing where the north and south node land in your chart are so significant, so incredibly powerful and necessary because it's how you understand where your soul's mission lies. Like, where are you? And some astrologers will say, like, what is your soul's original intent? Meaning, like, through the reincarnation process, if you subscribe to that belief and you don't have to. Um, what is your soul's initial purpose? And the South Node of past lives, that idea of reincarnation is if every lifetime we are living out our karmic lessons, every reincarnation, we're learning the lessons of our North and of our South Node. The North Node is like that guiding point that's pulling us through each lifetime of like, okay, we didn't learn all the lessons in this go around. Well, here's what we're going like here's what we do know and what we're taking with us into this next lifetime so that we can continue our karmic path. Does that make sense? I think um that's how I look at the individual placement in your chart. So that's why I said earlier, like at the start of the episode, that some astrologers really believe the placement in your natal chart, meaning like your personal north and south node placement, to be the most important points in your chart. Not every astrologer says this, but I actually think it's pretty significant too, which is why I've just been always so fascinated and drawn to this teaching in astrology. And the other thing I'll say about the personal placements is that if the sign, which we talked about being this generational collective theme, right? Everyone within those 18 to 19 months has the same sign. Mine is example. I was born in 1986, July 1986. And my north node is in Aries, my south node is in Libra. So if you're, around those time frame and you can look it up, we will have a similar collective theme.
My gosh, so your South Node it's going to be in Libra,
Yeah.
and your South Node is in Libra.
Um,
Okay. Well,
More
more
to
to come
come.
on that, but
But
anyways.
if we're all experiencing those collective themes of moving towards using an Aries like energy, assertive, action driven, courageous, right? Like Aries energy, if we're all collectively moving towards that, then the house number that it falls in for me personally is how it's going to dictate in my personal journey. That's how we differentiate. And so for me, it falls in my third house of communication and daily life and siblings, extended family. And so what that tells me is that while I'm on this collective journey of Aries leadership, action, ambitious, courageous type of independent energy, then my personal journey points towards that energy being really used in the way that I communicate, the way I use my voice, and the way I express myself and with confidence and really, like leading with my ideas and really developing over the course of my lifetime, developing a really strong sense of self in my communication, in my voice. And so everyone's is going to be specific to what house it falls in. So that's about the natal chart, right? That's the personal explanation. And then the collective themes, like we talked about throughout this episode about Pisces and North Node Pisces, I think that the collective theme is pointing us to, those moments. If I can, this is the example that comes up is those moments when people text me or call me and they're like, what's going on with the astrology today? Because it feels really wonky. Or what's happening, right? Like when we have those moments where like, oh, something feels off in the energy, or something feels like buzzy and I feel excited. I feel this collective energy. And I had this conversation with this person and they were feeling something similar, right? Like that's collective energy. And that's energy for us to be able to harness and say, like, oh, okay, I know what's going on in the cosmos today, or this transit, or an eclipse in Pisces. How can I personally navigate it? Knowing that Pisces, again, taking it back to the personal, lands in my second house of assets, money, finances, or resources. Well, how do I want to dream? What are my big dreams? What are my big visions when it comes to this particular area of my life of money, resources, assets? And how do I need to harness the energy while not getting lost in the escapism of Pisces or the dreamland of Pisces by not doing the work that it takes to get me to my goals when it comes to my second house of assets, money, resources? Does that like kind of land differentiating them a little bit?
I think sometimes it's like, yes, and why we recommend leaning into places you feel called and astrologers that you feel called to, because honestly, Michelle, like it's still some of this, all of the details, while I am such a detail oriented person with my three line, like I just need to see things come to fruition. So it's
1000%.
almost like, yes, with what you're saying makes total sense. If you were to ask me how that shows up in my life right now, I don't know that I'd have like an aha,
Yeah.
but it
Well, let's talk about it a little bit. We did talk about Pisces and your
yeah,
being your sun, but if we go back to your personal chart,
meaning like where Pisces is at.
your personal placement of North Road, and I think it's helpful to say, like, again, it's almost like we're having two
Mhm.
conversations because we are. And,
Yeah,
and maybe for the people who, like me, are manifesting generators and we can totally like bento box life and just like pick and choose things and jump from, different topics. I don't know, maybe it is easier to follow along. But if you think of it strictly as like we are having almost two conversations about the same topic, we're talking about on a collective level, we have this transit. Where does Pisces land for you personally so that you can
here's where
better
you'll find really big energies as a collective. Here's where
exactly how are you going to navigate it?
there's so many nuances to each individual that sometimes with the collective, it can seem a little daunting.
It
Well,
can.
for me, because I want to get into all of the details and like tell me more specifically. I want
Right.
to understand all of the
Well, and
nuances,
our
but
natal chart is it's a map of the sky the moment you were born, that you took your first breath, right? So the sky is infinite. And so there are infinite layers of learning and not, the North and South Node aren't going to be the single deciding factor of your life. This is one aspect. And so I think that there's, some importance simply because, yeah, like how do you navigate the collective energy? How do you show up in the most aligned, authentic way for you by knowing where this lands for you? And then the second conversation
yeah.
is just based purely on self discovery and self understanding. how do I know where my personal soul's mission is? Where is it playing out in my life? What are my comfort zones? What are the habits that I can lean on in challenging times that maybe are going to help me stay in those moments a little longer than I need to, right? So those are the two separate conversations.
So if we're looking at, so my sun is in Pisces in my seventh house. We're not going to dive too much deeper into that, but it's my identity, where I
Mm-hmm.
shine. Seventh house is committed partnerships. So I think just knowing that those, a lot can come up around that, and just really being mindful of that and digging deeper into that. And I guess, Michelle, it's, yeah, maybe very man gen, but also just the way different
Mm-hmm.
brains work, and you you navigate it that way, and that resonates for you. And I think we're seeing like real time. The way I tend to navigate through astrology is like, give me one
That's
thing.
exactly,
I need
yeah.
to like dive into like the one thing. So after this conversation, so for others, if you're just like, what? I'm going to discern of, hey, do I want to think about my North Node in the collective Pisces, or do I want to take a more interested look at just my overall North Node? So those are like action items for me just to think about, right?
Yeah.
Diving a little bit deeper. So then we get into our personal North Nodes. And what's interesting, because I can pull up my Channy app as we're talking, my North Node is in Cancer and my 11th house, and it screams so loud my strongest gift in human design, which is
Mm-hmm.
community, and talks a lot about, which just really resonates, again, like very, very hardcore, but talking about specifically in the 11th house is, and tell me again, North Node, if you were to explain North Node, that is like where we're
Yeah.
headed, where our
Soul's
purpose,
mission,
where we lead to, soul's mission.
growth.
Thank you. Yeah, just talks about being an intuitive
Mm-hmm.
caregiver. However, the habit of nurturing other people can feel burdensome if the same love and attention is not reciprocated. And without a satisfying energy exchange, you might start to feel resentful, worn, or emotionally burned out. And then also, you can self medicate yourself, which was interesting because we talked about in the nervous system how I recognized in my early 30s that I was just numbing myself by not breathing fully. So I just wouldn't feel the feels below the neck or the chest. And it's just when you talk about the boundaries and all of the things coming up, it resonates because I do have a theme right now. I mean, really for the last year or two of like, hey, I recognize how much I show up, and those behaviors, those qualities are not always reciprocated. And it doesn't mean like clean overhaul of nobody who shows up exactly like how I show up, but it's just getting more interested in like the equality of my relationships. And I think it also kind of explains that there's almost like that projection of your Cancer and your in your North Node of when you stop showing up, there can be people can have opinions about that. But your job as Cancer is really to take care of your soul and to make sure that you're nourished before taking care of others. And so that's an interesting shift or continuation in my mindset in the process that'll get on my radar.
Well, talk about everything being connected because I don't know how many times I have said or voice noted you this generator thing of like what's your biggest maybe lesson as a generator, and I'll paraphrase it, but I think it was, how do you be in service to others without losing yourself? And we had talked about that with you so often, right? And then talking about the other thing, which is your strongest gift in human design. Now we're talking about a totally different system, but I promise I'm going to bring it back to make sense because your strongest gift has to do with community in human design,
Creating win-win situations for the
creating win-win
collective.
situations
Mhm.
for the collective. And when I think about your North Node in your personal natal chart, your North Node in Cancer, Cancer, we're thinking about emotional connections, embracing a deep sense of compassion for yourself and for others. And I think developing emotional sensitivity as a wisdom, it comes up, right? These are my handwritten notes. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
And then I think of 11th house, which is community, social circles, right? And so if you put them together, right, your North Node in Cancer in the 11th house, what are you here? What's part of your soul's mission is to contribute to the collective, to the well being of the collective, while also developing a deep sense of belonging, emotional security in your friendships and in your community, right? Does any of that land like as, and it all connects, right? We're talking about two totally different systems and how they point you towards part of your soul's evolution and mission is to be this, like, is to be in service to others without losing yourself, right? Like literally, it all comes
Yeah.
back to that. And then I think about the archetype of Cancer, of the crab, hard exterior, soft inside.
Well, and you think, like themes throughout my life are also, I mean, I've had this where people have said, like, you just don't let everyone in. You just like,
Mhm.
you don't let people in. But it's also like when I let people in, I like really let them in, which feels very
Mhm.
Cancer to me. The other interesting thing is that what I was thinking about with the North Node is my godfather's wife is Paulette is just a beautiful soul, and we've connected ever since they got married. I was like in my early 20s, and she knows astrology really well, and she pointed out, well, my nephew is a Cancer, and she's like, wait, what's your sign? And you're a Cancer, or he's a Cancer, you're a Pisces. She's like, oh, no wonder you're bonded, you're kindred spirits. One of my gifts is also just being really observant and having a good memory around making connections, because gosh, that was now 15 years ago. And just really resonating that there are a lot of little Cancer babies that have been in my life and little children. And I felt
Wow.
like I have connected like in such a special way, like sun sign Cancers. I've seen
Yeah.
a pattern of that, and also Cancers in my life. There's just this really deep spiritual connection, and the part of my brain thinking about North nodes, I don't know, I just go to like what pings for me is, gosh, are you meant to connect just to like support each other? Like, am I around those little Cancer youngins who don't know any better about life? And it's teaching me in a really beautiful way how to follow my North Node. And that has been a really beautiful gift that the universe has given me without me even knowing astrology in that.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah.
Okay, the last connection I will throw out there is obviously your emotional authority in human
I
design.
was thinking it too.
I mean, everything points towards this, right?
I've been having a real hating my emotional authority lately, and that's why Michelle keeps laughing. But I've it's not missed on me. All of these things, as you say it real time, we giggle because
Yeah.
it resonates with the details of my life and what's going on.
Well, and this just that, you're here to ride the wave of your emotions. And I think you're here as people who are emotional authorities in human design, which, we haven't done an episode on yet, but it's in the works. And, you know, these are the people who are meant to make decisions, or their emotional authority is here to inform how they make decisions. And riding your emotional wave looks like not being afraid to feel the full depth and spectrum of human emotions. And by doing so, teaching the people around you, because you're putting out that consistent emotional energy, teaching the people around you that emotions are not to be feared. They're here to be felt. They are not fact, but they're here to be felt and to inform us on our path. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to see it all connected, right? Because I mean, how often are like our soul's purpose and our deepest gifts, like how often are we just like, adults walking around like so tuned into all of this? No, most of the time our deepest conditioning is like covering up our most profound gifts and authenticity.
Mhm.
That's just the nature of life, right? Like, and I think if I were to come back to the conversation about the North Node eclipse in Pisces, or just this whole conversation in general, the whole point of this is, again, awareness, understanding yourself. But this particular eclipse in the North Node in Pisces, it's like, how do we move towards the vision or the dreams or whatever the thing is that we're moving towards? or the positive changes or transformations in our life without being tempted to fall or to avoid our own reality, to avoid our own challenges, to avoid our own difficulties. And when it's around eclipse season, to me, that screams like, pay attention and stay grounded or get grounded. Like those, if I, and maybe that's a perfect segue to like practical
Yeah.
guidance.
Where's your North Node? You said Aries.
Aries, yes. North Node and Aries in my third house.
What does that look like for you?
All about Aries, ambition, independence, courageous, bold, all of the words that you can think of to describe Aries energy, and falls within my third house of communication, extended family, siblings, daily life. And so it's for me, it's a lot about, like activating my voice and expressing myself confidently in my voice. We're not going to talk about Chiron today, but my Chiron is in my fifth house of creative expression. And so much, again, back to the interconnectedness, so much within my chart and in human design, my life theme is the left angle of the alpha, or I may be saying that wrong, but basically everything in, all of these signs connect towards leaning into and really rooting into my own sense of self, into my own leadership, into that courageous. And again, I'm a Leo, right? So like I always think of this like fiery, bold Leo energy and taking that into the way that I create my own sense of independence in this life, and doing it by activating my voice in the way that I communicate myself, or, and in the way that I express my creativity through projects. And so, a good example is this podcast. Like, this is a perfect platform and outlet for me to lean into my voice and build the confidence because, yes, my North Node's in Aries in this third house of communication. That does not mean that I was here born with the ability to speak confidently and express myself with that sense of self. It means that that's where I'm moving towards. And so I get to look at these opportunities to do it, and and in this particular case, right, to do it with accountability, to have that shared vision. If we go back to that, what you said earlier, it's like having that shared vision. While our visions overlap, we also have our own unique visions that feed into what we want to accomplish or get out of this podcast. And part of that for me is like just showing up. I have no choice, right? Because we have accountability of being in partnerships. Talk about seventh house of committed partnerships. And I have to show up even when I don't feel confident. I get to show up and I get to build that in real time. And all of the things that come along with podcasting, I think, are really such a beautiful way to activate that North Node for me personally.
When you think about that and you think about Pisces as from a collective standpoint, but then being an Aries in your North Node, like practical solutions for you, what are you doing to take note of that, work with those energies, be mindful of, like, what do you do with that information now?
Well, okay. First things I will say are, well, you said this already, and I think it's really important for anyone listening. It's super, super important to just lean into where your own curiosity and excitement is taking you. Do you, when we talked about Pisces and this collective energy and your big dream and the vision and all of that, like, is something piquing your interest and making you want to explore that a little bit more? And if so, then go find where Pisces lands in your chart so that you can understand what house and what that house represents. If you are being called to better understand your personal placements right now, then drop the rest and go just look at where North Node, where is that little horseshoe at in your chart? Understand what sign it lands in and what's the approach or the style or the how of that particular sign, and what house number, where is this playing out for you? And you're going to find loads of information out there. When I first started, of course, I did Dara Dumanet had this North Node course, and it was really great and it was very simple. Just gave you a little bit more information. And then I started to look at episodes on YouTube. I found an astrologer, and this was a couple years ago, but I found an astrologer who was doing videos. So I was just kind of learning my way around. I didn't even know to look at the houses until I found a second astrologer. And then and so go where your curiosity, go where your excitement is taking you, because truthfully, all of this, like, we're going to be learning more about our own nodes. We're going to be learning more about astrology throughout our entire life, if you so choose to.
Mm.
And so there are layers of learning. Just start where you're feeling called. So that's I will say that. Like, pause, don't, get so wrapped up in all the conversation because you don't want to overwhelm yourself. And so,
Be on social media too. If you
gosh, yes.
start to follow astrologers, they will typically, when big energetic things like this are
Mhm.
happening, they will post things. And right, it's not in an hour podcast you have to listen to. You don't have to. We hope you choose to listen
Yeah,
to it.
please do.
But I say that more so because even just quick posts from astrologers can give
Mhm.
you just a quick nugget of information, and that might resonate with you as well. So, and then
100%.
of course, astrologers have, I'm always going to shout out Chris Corsini. I'm sure he is going to have some sort of workshop around that time. In the Channy Nicholas app, there are always journal prompts that associate with the energetics. There's some
Mhm.
practical action items around the eclipse coming up in the North Node if you wanted more. And then
Yeah, it's kind of like I think it's all a lifelong game of knowing yourself because, and experimenting. Everything comes down to experimenting for me personally. And obviously, three line energy for you, but it's like I'm always thinking of, how many times, even using Instagram, like how often do I go through and I'm deleting astrologers because I'm like, oh, at one point I thought I would be really interested. And then I realized that this person uses so much wording that it's overwhelming. So I'm going to let it go and I'm going to go find the astrologer that gives me maybe it's a bite sized dose or whatever. And that changes over time. And so it's just like, again, I think everything we're always going to talk about is like, go with your own flow. Like, what is coming up for you? And start there because there's just so much out there. And so, yes. And I will say that, talking about practical guidance, I already said this, but like rest, reflect, get grounded, whatever that looks like for you. Doesn't mean like rest, doesn't mean like go to sleep. Like, rest meaning maybe if you're feeling like, oh, she's telling me that I might have more intuitive insights, but I hear nothing. I don't even know what my intuition sounds like, or I don't feel like I have or a connection to my intuition. Maybe it's a gut instinct or whatever it is, or my dreams don't speak to me. I don't remember them. I mean, everyone's so different. So, whatever that looks like for you in order to, I don't know, is it quiet your mind? Is it journaling? Is it meditating or whatever it is that allows you to listen in to your own body, your own emotions, your own inner knowing? Maybe it's a good time to practice that.
mhm. Yeah, and I think having the conversations with people, if things are coming up or people who might be in that space, it's always really helpful to have friends like Michelle just to say.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I joke a little bit earlier, and I know Mercury retrograde is a more socially known thing,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
I mean, literally, I was telling Michelle this whole trip. I just got back from California, and I'm like, I don't know what it's like. Everything electronically is going wrong. Like my computer just stopped working, but now magically it's just fine again. And it just kept having all of these hiccups. And so sometimes I think the practical advice I would give is just being aware. Like that is a good place to start because, sometimes it's just like, fuck Mercury retrograde, fuck all of these emotions coming through with the lunar eclipse. Like I'm over it. And for me, like sometimes just knowing it and having people to bounce off is probably why we giggle a little bit throughout this episode because it's like, oh, makes so much sense, but it's like real time how being able to have conversations with trusted friends and being able to be vulnerable takes me from a place of that overburden, over emotional, feeling overextended to like, all right, can we just laugh about this a little bit? Like, it's really a
Yeah.
lot, and we see where this is going, and these themes will continue to show up, but it also has a beautiful way of just affirming that, again, all of these modalities are for your highest good. And for me, knowing that boundaries and self care and not gaslighting my own healing and my own growth are big themes for me,
Yeah.
being aware of that time, there's probably going to be some boundaries being pushed because it is in my seventh house of committed partnership,
Mhm.
because the 11th house is like friends, that there are probably going to be people pushing on those trigger buttons for me during that time. And so, just how can I be prepared?
Yeah. And acknowledge your feelings.
Oh,
Feel your feelings. If ever a time to practice feeling your feelings without taking immediate action on them, it would probably be around now to
mhm.
just honor whatever that is. If it's an emotional wave of depths of emotions, letting yourself go there without, and what you said earlier, like spiritual bypassing, without judging our emotions, without labeling or placing some sort of deeper meaning. Like, yeah, do the reflection, process them, journal on it, do whatever you need to do, but feel them and don't feel the need to take some immediate, like, I've got to do something now in response to this. No, just listen to what they're telling you. And did I say spiritual bypassing? Yeah, avoiding spiritual bypassing, which, is a popular term, but just means like be real with yourself. And that's why I think the journaling is so important. Like, it's so silly, but sometimes you just wake up and you want to journal and you're like, I am pissed, right? Well, if that's your first sentence or whatever the feeling is, like the next thing that usually happens and why journaling can be so powerful is like, okay, I'm pissed. Well, why? Now you get to journal. What happened? This happened. I woke up on the wrong side of the bed and so didn't do the thing or whatever it is. Okay. Now, why am I so pissed about this? Okay, keep journaling, keep reflecting, keep processing. Why is that? Okay, well, why does that hit on this particular trigger button for me? And like go there, let yourself reveal all of the stuff you already know, but it's just so covered up by, all of the things, right?
Kind
So,
of what I just did earlier with like, I wasn't being honest with you. I was like, the escapism and that like triggered me, but that's why we're here, is to kind of show the behind the scenes and the process of just thinking through and processing all of the things.
yeah, triggers can be buried treasures.
I'm not on that wave today.
Well, me, open emotional center, I'm like, yes, let's dig them up.
Dear universe, Michelle's asking for more triggers. She would like more triggers. I'm good. I'm good today. If you're listening. All right. In closing, let's do our self-love check-in. And you had come up with really two beautiful questions. And so I'm feeling called to ask you, how can you listen to your intuition and take care of your emotions over the upcoming weeks?
Okay, so for me, gosh, without going on a tangent, I am a sacral being in human design and true to form, like, which means I do operate on gut instincts a lot of the time. And also, one of the things that is important for me personally is understanding what a gut response is and when my intuition is speaking to me because they're slightly different. And I can't even say that I'm like an expert on tuning into either over the other. And I think that's part of how I'm, to answer the question is like, how can I listen to my intuition? Well, it's trying to parse out when I'm feeling this bodily gut response of like, yes, this is a thing for me, or no, I don't want to do it. And when it's my intuition whispering to me, like, hey, like looking out for my highest good. I think that's how I would differentiate them now. So just being more aware, not ignoring the little signals. And sometimes I try to pay attention to the really, really subtle intuitive hits, like, oh, go grab that charger before, And I think in those
Mhm.
moments, it helps me recognize the difference. And I've heard this said before that your intuition speaks as this quiet whisper and doesn't repeat itself. I've heard this like a few times from people and I actually think it resonates for me. It lands like, yeah, it's not going to repeat itself. You're like, okay, I heard the thing. It wasn't so much of a hell, full body hell, yeah, it's like the gut, right? So I think just learning to, maybe it's just actually listening to it. And when I think about taking care of my emotions, it's truly always a game of learning to process all the emotions that maybe I'm taking in, especially when I'm around certain people or places, and not getting super, super wrapped up in that being my own. Because more often than not, it's not. I'm just like taking someone else's energetics or emotions and really making it my own, or I'm amplifying it. And then I'm like, wait, hold on. Why is my chest really tight when 2 minutes ago I was totally chill? So that's what I'm working on. So, what about you?
How am I listening to my intuition to take care of my emotions over the next couple of weeks? Just alone time is going to be important for me. Gosh, it feels very Cancer crab of just like kind of going into my shell just a little bit. Or like, why did you
That's something I
almost,
know very much about.
why did you just almost spit your water out?
I was laughing because I was like, yeah, I get it. Yep. The hermit, two
Yeah, yeah,
line
yeah.
and human design hermit. But then I had the visual of like, I'm just going to go in my shell.
I can start to feel when my energies are getting really heightened, and like a big telltale sign for me is when I start to feel like I gaslight my own thoughts and my own feelings and my own emotions and my own intuition. And so I think just over the next upcoming weeks, really leaning in. Like I said, I just got back from a 2-week whirlwind trip where it was beautiful and all the things. And I think now energetically, I was intentionally meant to come home now to start getting back in my routine and some of my self-care and self-love, because that's when I connect to my intuition a little bit more, when I'm routined, when I'm getting enough sleep, when I'm surrounded by people who want my highest good and are supportive. And that's kind of where I think I'll live the next couple of weeks, because I'm imagining that I will most likely be one of those people who has a lot of dreams and intuition coming through during that point, as history has shown me. And historically, I have gaslit my intuition and been fearful of the intuition. And so I think in the next coming weeks of looking at it from more of a mindset of, I really got this from our past episode too, of that's interesting. What if that was true as intuition comes through? What would that mean if that was true? That was like a cool thing that I got from Tess in our sound healing episode. And also recently when I was feeling my nervous system was shot, and I called my friend Stacy, and she, without even knowing, just kind of said, okay, so let's play that out. Like, that's true. Let's play it out. And so, again, that's kind of like full circle and dancing around a little bit of just being in zones like that, and, being really in places of discerning who's important to be around. Because, like I said before, it's really easy for me to get overwhelmed or triggered with the dreams versus the responsibility or the reality. And I can define sometimes reality as
Yeah,
social programming of what we should do. And that's not always how you need to live life. And so I think just maybe talking through this discernment
for sure.
and how I'm spending my time and who I'm surrounding myself with to really embrace my intuition and all that it has to offer. Because it is a gift. It's just when you're an emotional authority and you've got all of these really watery, big emotional signs, it can feel heavy sometimes.
Yeah, I can only imagine because I don't have the emotional wave in that way, although I can experience it, but oftentimes it's a reaction to someone else's emotional wave that I'm experiencing. I'm experiencing my reaction to it. So it feels different than what you experience emotionally. And, we've talked about this at length. Like my husband is a 3-5 emotional authority. You are a 3-5 emotional authority. I have a lot of people in my life that are emotional authorities, and oftentimes I'm like, whoa, you guys are really feeling some big emotions here. Like, but the reality of it is like, that's the whole point. Like, that's literally the whole point. And we don't live on this earth alone. We're not meant to do life alone. So when we talk about reflections and people relationships being our biggest mirrors, um when I'm feeling someone else's big emotional wave and it throws me off, it's because it's not natural to me, but it's like an invitation. Oh, what is this teaching me? How can I process my reaction to their emotions or what I'm feeling someone giving off? And how can I like store that away as learning, as deeper wisdom for myself? How can this person's emotions and their ability to just feel their emotions and to go there, how can that teach us other people? How can it teach us to hold our emotions with much more compassion, which with much more tenderness for ourselves, so that we're not running away from them and then numbing ourselves or whatever the thing is, or we're not, yeah, I just there's so much beauty in there. There's so much, so much. And it's cool because throughout our episodes, and I just envision like multiple episodes later, we get to listen back and hear even more insights. We're like, oh, we learned this over the course of XYZ.
I was literally just had that exact
Psychic.
thought. And it gets to be really cool. Michelle and I think are really energetically in tune. And I think that comes with just the vulnerability and just being open to it. So it's things like literally we'll text at the same time, like, how about 11:30? It's like the
Yeah.
same time. We literally just did that today. Literally, Michelle was just having that exact same thought that you were having. So
Cool.
beautiful episode. And I love that you continue to highlight the North Node. It lights me up, and I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper. More to come, Karmic Mirror listeners, because we have a South Node in Libra. Is it an eclipse, Michelle?
We do. So we're going into eclipse season, which will mean we'll have 2 back-to-back eclipses. So as you may or, as most people I think can look up in the sky and see, we have the full moon, and then 2 weeks later we have a new moon, which is the solar eclipse happening in the South Node, which is going to be in Libra at that time. So we're going to talk about that. And the last thing I'll plug for myself is I do have a blog. I wrote about the North and South Node. So if you want to read, if you're a person who likes to read and likes blogs, then you can certainly go to my website. We'll tag it. And
Michelle, just share, where is your blog? What's its name, and where can our listeners find it?
You can go to my website, which is michelledelval.co. And also, if you'd like, you can subscribe to my newsletter, which is on Substack, monthly-ish musings. And I will be my August newsletter, which, it's almost the end of August, but I'm going to release a newsletter this month. And I recorded 2 meditations, and my initial intent was to record a yoga nidra, which is a really beautiful yogic sleep and relaxation meditation for Mercury retrograde. But honestly, you can do it anytime. And I think it's going to be really cool to have that around with the eclipse season. I recorded 2, like a morning meditation, which is all about, connecting with your highest self and your intuition. And the other one is the yoga nidra.
I didn't know you were doing the morning one. I feel like I just manifested it because I'm so over the ads in my morning manifestation.
I
So I stopped
know.
doing it. So here, I can't wait to incorporate yours into my morning routine.
Yes.
Thank you for tuning in and learning all about the North Node. We will be getting into the South Node in a very near future episode. So thank you for logging in, and be blessed, everyone.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. If you resonated with what you heard today, join us in this vibrant community of seekers, dreamers, and creators. Find us on Instagram at Karmic Mirror Podcast and stay connected with us for additional content, updates, and more. We love hearing from our community and engaging in conversations.
You can catch all our episodes anywhere you listen to podcasts, so make sure to subscribe. And if you really love what you're hearing, we'd be so grateful if you would leave us a 5-star review or share with someone who might benefit from our content. Your feedback means the world to us.
As we bid you farewell, we encourage you to embrace the ever-unfolding story of your life. Life's too short for a one-size-fits-all approach. Remember, your path to flourishing is uniquely yours.
Until next time on the Karmic Mirror, stay true, stay curious, and always be kind to yourself.